This is Susan Popoola, host of the Leading the Mosaic World podcast, with a special series on being a man in today's world. As of late, I found myself increasingly conversing with men and focusing my work on boys and men. Boys and young men trying to find their place in the world, emerging leaders in the workspace, established leaders navigating increasingly complex environments, and successful men missing a sense of real fulfillment. It all points to the question of what it means to be a man in today's world. A question fundamental to men, for gender harmony, and for a Mosaic world in which everyone is valued for who they are and what they have to offer to the world around them. Join me as I explore this subject with a rich diversity of men and women too. Thank you. This is a special series of the Leading in the Mosaic World podcast on being a man in today's world. My guest today is Bob Bradley. Bob is a speaker, facilitator and coach specializing in leadership and strategy for growth. With over 40 years experience in senior management, business advisory services, mentoring, non-executive directorship, and so much more. Through his last business, he guided over 300 business leaders. Now officially retired, his objective is to share as much of his experience as he can so that people can learn from his experience and mistakes. In his spare time, he enjoys spending time with family, travel, skiing, and to keep himself sane, he jumps into a barrel of cold water most mornings, even when it's got ice in it. And having said that, he's just mentioned to me that he's now a Guinness World Record holder, having achieved the ice mile, the oldest male to have done so. So first and foremost, congratulations for that, Bob, and thank you very much for being my guest today.
It's a delight to be here. Thank you.
I've given a rather formal introduction to who you are. How would you describe yourself?
Oh, interesting. Describing yourself is always a challenge. And yeah, I was chuckling as you were going through it. So how would I describe myself? I think you touched on it. My sort of biggest part of my world, my life, is my care for my wife and family. That's the most important thing to me. And I'm very lucky in having 4 kids who are all fit and healthy and good friends now. They're adults. Life is good. In terms of me, in some ways, I'm the sort of archetypical British English gentleman that's been brought up to be sort of fairly quiet, self-effacing, shy, a little bit geeky. But if you push me, you find I'm a bit of a maverick, that I don't do things the same as everybody else does. I'm independent-minded, hence the sort of I smile, things like that. I'm also, the I smile confirms something I've sort of known about myself, which is I'm bloody minded. I'm a bit, positive word, determined, or bloody minded, depending on how you see it. If I decide I want to do something, it takes quite a lot to stop me.
That's great to hear. But it's also interesting when you talk about yourself as the typical English gentleman, self-deprecating, relatively reserved, but then there's what's under the surface. And I say that's interesting because more often than not, when we talk about men, and that stereotype is how men are brash and overconfident. Are you different because you're a maverick, or is that just a stereotype that doesn't reflect the reality?
I think it's certainly a stereotype that doesn't reflect every reality. I don't think any stereotype does, really. I mean, we're all different. There's a billion different people in the world. Using stereotypes a little bit as a simplification, I think there's more than one stereotype of males. There is the brash, cocky, macho stereotype. But there's also, I think it's also a stereotype that there's the quiet English gentleman. I think of my father-in-law. He died at the age of 98. He was a lovely, gentle, very thoughtful, very clever guy who wouldn't say boo to a goose, really. So I think there are multiple stereotypes of males, but I guess as I say it, I dislike the concept of stereotypes. Part of my thinking is one of the ways in which I've developed over the years is to learn not to play the stereotype, if you like. As I say, at school, I was the quiet one, the shy one, the polite one, rather than the gang leader. It's taken me 40, 50 years to come out of my shell and be a bit more confident. So I've moved in the direction of that, of being more confident and outgoing, but without letting go of what's sort of my core. So I dislike stereotypes, I think.
And as you say, if we get focused, there's something in having some, should I say, a broad overview of, okay, this is a man, so, but then holding the space and then allowing the person to unfold and finding out who the person really is beneath the surface. I think that's key. To understand you better, I'd love to know a bit about what life was like for you. Where were you born? Where were you raised? What was life like for you growing up?
Okay, so I was very lucky. I had a good start in life. I lived in the West Oxfordshire Cotswolds, so sort of 12 miles from Oxford. Countryside, nice school, nice mum and dad. I was lucky in my start in life. I'm not saying we were wealthy or anything. I mean, I look back and I'm sure my mum and dad struggled at times. And I look back and I think about some of the things I experienced when I was young. But I never felt hard done by. I never felt poor or anything, sort of thing. But neither feel wealthy, I suppose. It was just normal. And I guess that's probably true of most people. That when we grow up, the normal is us. So it was quite a good life. A formative bit for me was at school. I was always a bit of an outsider because I didn't join the gangs. I've always been a bit independent-minded, and so I didn't follow the sort of rival gangs in the school, which tends to be for boys. I tend to be the one that had fights with both gangs because I wouldn't do as other people expect me to. Despite being quiet, I was, as I say, quite determined. And then probably I found my space in my late teens in the swimming club. Swimming club was my life, and I think swimming is a great sport because it's a team sport and an individual sport at the same time. And, we were really close as a group of swimmers, competing with other clubs and so on. So that was quite formative for me. And one of the themes of your talks is gender. I look back and it wasn't particularly gender friends. It was, there were girls and boys and we all mixed and got on well together. I suppose obviously late teens there did become the boy girl bit. But a lot of the girls were good friends as much as girls, if that makes sense.
It does make sense.
So that was my early youth. So I guess the next major milestone in my life, and I'm pausing because I'm realising that I'm skipping my first marriage, because the next major milestone was my father dying. He died quite young, age 54, and that is big in my life and big in my way of thinking. The moment I was a day older than he ever was very noticeable in my life, because from that point onwards, I felt like every day is borrowed time, days he didn't have, and that creates a sort of attitude and behaviour in life of this might be my last day, so let's make the most of it. I'm lucky to have today. My dad didn't have today, so let's go for it. The impact of my father's death on my life is significant in making me more prepared to go for it and take sensible risks and do things that are slightly uncomfortable or unusual. Hence the ice mile. Not many people swim a mile in under 5 degrees centigrade, and particularly not at 67 and become the oldest male in the world. So I wonder whether I'd have done it if my dad hadn't died when I was young.
How old were you? I mean, how old were you when your dad died?
I have to work it out. 32.
32. So, yeah, because I asked that question thinking about young people that grow up without a father. 32 is still young to not have your father around. And so I just wonder with that, what the value of having your father around for your childhood into your early adult was, and what it was then like not having him around.
Yeah, that's a great question, because there's actually what comes to mind is this half positive, half negative reaction to my father. So my father died of a heart attack. I was 32, as I say, so I was sort of an adult, and I was aware he was very stressed and not well for a couple of years beforehand. But he bottled it up, wouldn't talk about it. I tried to get him to talk about it, and he wouldn't. It was sort of like, no, I'm all right, sort of stiff upper lip sort of style. So the sort of negative is he wasn't very good at talking about things that matter for him or for me. So he wasn't much of a mentor in that sense. That's the negative half. The real positive half is the role model. I look back at my father and think he would have done anything for us as his kids. He'd done anything for the family, anything for his friends. I like to think I'm quite like him. I try to be helpful. I try to help people. I try and make people's lives better in whatever way I can. Although my experience is business, my goal is to help people running businesses feel better about running their businesses and to do it more successfully. It's not about them making money that matters. I'm wanting them to enjoy leading their businesses and to be successful. And actually, I like to think that by helping them do a better job of leadership, I'm helping everybody in their businesses, all their staff, to have a better life as well. So there's a sort of leverage effect there. So I think my father's impact on me was sort of both sides. I mean, there's the side that realises that the weakness of the stereotypical English gentleman that bottles it all up. But at the same time, there's the recognising the commitment to doing the right thing by your family, your friends, your community, the people. There were both halves there for I learned from my father.
So, so as you said, there was the role modelling, which we often say is absent for a number of young people today.
Yep.
Especially we talk about that in relation to boys, and it's often almost positioned that that is a key problem, that if they had the role models. And you would agree with that?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I think we have a problem as a society. Not specifically the lack of father in the home, but the fact that gender is such a big issue is almost the problem, because it's become such a sort of battleground and stereotype. And father's one role model, but male teachers are a second key role model for children. I'm upset when I read the number of men in primary schools being trivial, because if there isn't a father and there isn't a father at home, and the only males they're seeing are playing the macho stereotype model or something else, and they don't see professional males doing a professional male job, doing a job professionally, then where do boys learn from? I mean, if I go back to one of the things I remember hearing 30, 40 years ago when I was trying to bring my son up well, I went to see a speaker on raising boys, and he said something really interesting, and or for me it was interesting, which sort of explains why I am a little bit reticent, but I am open about my feelings. I can talk about my feelings to a degree, but I'm not good at it, and I struggle a bit. But I mentioned my father, who couldn't talk about his feelings. If you go back to my father's father, probably even less so than my father. At least my father felt human and soft to me. He had a humanity even if he couldn't talk about it. My grandfather had to play the stereotype of the stiff upper lip and never let emotions be seen. And if you go back to my grandfather's grandfather, sort of who would have grown up in the late Victorian age, their experience of male role models would have been, Dad works in the fields or the factory and comes home at night and beats me with a belt. So I actually would buy into the idea that some of the challenges we males have in life today are because we're only 4 or 5 generations on from fathers that were separated from their family all day to work 12-hour shifts in the factory or the fields, and whose role was to come home and beat the kid up and have nothing to do with them emotionally. And I think we lost an awful lot in the Industrial Revolution. My understanding, and I'm no historian, but my understanding is prior to that, boys learnt from their fathers by working with them in the fields. And so they had men around to learn from and to engage with. And so I don't want to make it seem idyllic because I'm sure it wasn't, but in the 1700s, 1800s, the 1700s anyway, the pre-industrial revolution sort of time, boys had role models and role models they worked with. They grew up as a apprentice. The dad was working in blacksmith. The dad was working in the as a farrier, working in the fields, whatever. And they would work with them from the age of, well, possibly, I don't know for sure, but 12 onwards and maybe younger. They'd be working with their fathers. So they'd get to know how to be a male. As I say, I think that was all taken away during the Victorian age when men were taken away from their kids. And we've not quite got back to that yet. In fact, we've gone the other way. Probably the sweet time was probably earlier 20th. The sweet time, I want to say the sweet time was the early 20th century because you saw your father. I certainly grew up near my father, but he didn't know how to role model me because he'd been through this. So I do think there's a big problem for the upbringing of males in this society, which we need to keep working on. I suppose the positive bit of me thinks it is getting better. I'm more able to talk about my feelings than my father was. I think my son is even more able to talk about his feelings. And my daughters encourage me and my son to talk about our feelings as well. So there's a sort of, I think it is heading in a better direction in my world, but I appreciate that may not be true of people growing up in the inner city with no father around.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that. I mean, there's so much there because I'm like thinking of the trends over time and the things that might have formulated the way men behaved at different eras. And I appreciate, as you said, you're not necessarily speaking from an academic perspective, but these are
Definitely not.
your observations for your father, possibly your grandfather, and the things that you've heard and seen, and seeing the good and the bad of how things were. Because I don't think it would have ever been good that the father's not around and then he comes home with a belt because you've done something wrong. And you still hear that from a few decades back, that the message of when your father gets home, what he's
Yeah.
going to do is a different. But when you wait till your father gets home.
You wait till your father gets home. It's the phrase. I mean, I grew up with to a degree as well, but not for me, but for some of my friends at school.
Yeah, and so I guess that speaks something of a time whereby the father was, should I say, he wasn't necessarily present, and that was the role until I guess the child gets to a stage whereby the child is going out, a boy, because going out to work with his father and then learning a trade, getting to that stage. And so you're just learning from the observation and being there with a father, and how things have evolved to now, whereby you might have a father in the house or you might not. But then if you don't, and then who are the role models?
That's the key question, and I think that's the thing that if we're going to pay attention to improving society, need to look at is how do we enable young boys to have role models of, for want of a better word, decent role models, decent human beings, and decent behaviours.
Yeah, because there is a lot spoken of
Yes.
quote unquote role models, or I guess a better word is influencers,
Yep.
and that those influencers actually do fit into a stereotype, the stereotype of the macho and what you need to do in order to, should I say, be successful. Potentially a narrow definition of successful about wealth and things. And so what you need to be successful and what you need to get to get a woman and all of those other things. I don't know, I guess you're a different generation where we didn't have the internet to, should I say, have that level of influence. I find it interesting that not only didn't you have that, there's a lot spoken about groupthink and gangs and conformity. And yet you mentioned that you weren't part of one of the gangs, that you were independent minded. And so just pulling that all together, I just wonder, what would you say enabled you to think independently, to be your own person, that could be useful for people today as well?
Was it nurture or nature? I don't know. I think the independent minded is possibly nature. There's sort of something in me and something in the genetics, and because my family are like that in previous generations too. But there's a bit of nurture as well, because my mum and dad brought me up to be independent and to think for myself and that sort of thing. That, as I say, they were good parents. I do worry about the sort of challenges we face for boys and men in the world through social media and the stereotype of the dad not being at home. I don't think as bad as sometimes we feel it is in the media, because I think there's an awful lot of more normal homes. Now, they might today be more complex homes than they were in the past.
Blended family.
Not always the blended families, complex families, whatever. But I'm part of one. My family is complex. Although my family is complex, it's a good family, if that makes sense. It feels like, I would say this, wouldn't I? It feels like my kids do a good, do things well, and they're well behaved and whatever. So, and I think the majority are like that. If you work in the space of gender as you do, then obviously you see the thing that's highlighted as the problem areas. So I think we should perhaps take care not to overstate the problem and to recognise the large number of people who run normal things, but not to deny the problem, because I certainly agree with you. I think I do worry about social media, the stereotypes, and I think male as well as female as well as male. The social media tends to reinforce the perceived stereotype of a way to be. And I think actually, as I think about that, I'm thinking, yeah, but don't try and follow a stereotype. But, the thing that I've learned in life is to be me.
Yeah.
Not to be what anybody else wanted. When I was, as I say, I want to rant about this for a second, because at school, the stereotype was to be in the gang and to fight and all that stuff, and I didn't want to do that, and I didn't do it. I was able to stand back from it. In my early career, it was about business, it was about ambition, it was about goals and all the other stuff. And what I've learned is none of that matters. It's about doing what you want to do and to do what you believe to be right. That's what I would want to empower any guys listening. Almost is do I suppose I've got a very positive view of human instinct. If we think about things and we do what we believe to be right for us and the people around us, then the world's a better place. Where it goes wrong is when you try and conform to a stereotype. We conform to a stereotype of joining the gang as a child. You conform to the stereotype of being the hard-nosed bee that, beats people up at work and bullies them, because that's what a male role model is supposed to do. I guess there's the same problem with females, that you play the stereotype. And I'm using the binary sort of male-female. It's also, you play the stereotype of being the non-binary person, and that's a stereotype as well. No, be you. Whatever you are is okay. And yeah, I want to liberate people to be themselves and do what they really, if they think about it, perceive as right. I'm not sure that gang members, and want to be violent and whatever. They just feel that's what they have to do to fit in.
Yeah, I was listening to a masterclass from a lady who's done extensive work with gender and men, and she spoke about the pressure that a lot of young boys face to do certain things. And it might be like she spoke of a situation where there was a boy that was, was getting quite aggressive. And she was like, she could look in his eyes and she could see the fear, and that it wasn't what he really wanted to do, but he felt compelled to do that. And so I guess there is a lot of that. And there is a lot of wider pressure. The pressure to, should I say, how you need to look, how you need to dress, the things you should have. And that's focusing on men, since that's the topic today. So boys and men. The pressure to do all of these things. And it's like, how do you contend with that? Now, I mean, you're touching on that in many ways in terms of being yourself, but I'm just thinking for the young boy who's got his mates, his friends, who are saying this is what we'd need to do. And I suspect if you broke it down, a lot of them might not want to, but because it's a general expectation, they feel pressurized to do that. The social media and the algorithms and what it presents to young boys, and how it draws them down a path, and how do you contend to be able to step back from that. The man in the workspace, as you've mentioned, who feels he has to be a certain way, and all of those things. And it's like, how do you contend with all of that as a young man?
Yeah, I don't have any magic answers. I do think the core of the answer is something to do with engaging, and I might say this as an older guy anyway, finding ways to engage older guys with young males so that they can see you don't have to conform to the stereotype. See, let's use the business bit of my life as an example. I felt to be successful in business, I had to behave in certain ways. I experienced successful male bullies and female bullies, to be fair. And the image you get is that to be successful, you've got to be sort of clawing your way up the ladder. But I gradually realised that that wasn't what I wanted to do. Even if it was the way up the ladder, it wasn't what I wanted to do. And became successful by almost the opposite. I believe my management style was probably what would be seen as stereotypical female management style, of being interested in people, wanting to know what they wanted to get out of their job and where they wanted to go and were they happy. And now that doesn't mean I was soft. I was sort of very much the iron fist and the velvet glove as a leader. But so the iron fist is there because you have to. You've got a job to do. You've got to make the right decisions, whatever they are. If you're a leader in an organisation or a country, you have to make the big decisions. You can't duck them, but at the same time, you try to implement them with humanity and care and consideration for the individuals. My natural style was what would be stereotypically a female leadership style. And I see many, actually, I know we're talking mainly about men, but I also see many females that want to succeed in business trying to become the male stereotype as well. Some of the most bullying business leaders I've come across are females who are trying to be the hard-nosed whatever. So for me, it's about educating people to be themselves and do what they really believe to be right and humane and whatever. How we overcome the social media problem, I don't know, because it is reinforcing people down a narrower and narrower funnel, as though that's the way to be. And I don't quite know it. As I say, maybe it's just engaging young people with older people that have learned that you don't have to be like that.
And maybe there's something about creating the more positive narrative on social media as well. I've just, a few months back, I came across this guy with his son, this man. His son has just turned 18, and you have these conversations between father and son, and they talk about all sorts of things. The things that the son gets wrong, his mother's menstrual cycle, all sorts of things, consent, you name it, they have those conversations. And maybe if we have more conversations like that, maybe conversations like that online, and we get those things trending. I want to believe that the algorithms aren't naturally set up to lead people to negative things, but they lead people down a path of things that they think are of interest that people are engaged with. So maybe we can start developing a movement of father and son. I mean, because I have worked with young people who have been in care, and I thought, gosh, I'd love to get him to do a series of talks, short clips for young people in that space. So that's shared, and maybe if we can have a number of people, who knows, yourself included, just sharing things online in a way that is engaging, and start getting young people around the world to engage. And then I want to believe the algorithms should start promoting that, unless they're just naturally bad and evil in their own right.
Yeah, no, I think you're on the right track, and actually credit to you and to me being egocentric, just doing it now, what we're doing now. I mean, my motivation in saying to you, yes, I'll do the podcast was, I can't see any commercial motivation in it. It's because I think this stuff is important, and we need to get the word out there that you don't have to be a bully to be a male. You don't have to follow the gang, do this, do that. You can be a good, nice human being. There's nothing wrong with being nice.
Yeah, two things. One is you are living evidence that you don't have to bully people to get results. You don't have to be nasty or horrible in order to succeed and achieve success, because I read out, should I say, a very short introduction about you, which says nothing of what you've achieved. Because I guess many moons ago you worked in consultancy, and that's large consultancy firms. You've been managing director of companies. You've been on boards like Local Enterprise Partnership Board. You've been president of Chamber of Commerce. You've been on the board of Education Partners. I mean, you name it, you've done those things. You have to have something about you to have been able to do all of those things and so many more, and achieve the success. I mean, I did also mention the 300 plus. I'm sure the 300s is a nominal amount of people that you've supported with their businesses and help lead them on to varying degrees of success. So there has to be something about your model of leadership that works.
Yeah, difficult to argue, but I see. To me, I'm just me. I'm just a normal person, and okay, maybe there are characteristics I have that others don't, but I don't think of it like that at all. I think anybody could do what I've done. It's just about having ambition to make the world a better place, I suppose. And I'm not meaning I don't see myself as massively altruistic. I'm not doing it to altruistically. I enjoy feeling good about doing stuff. So chair governors for 14 years. Why was I doing it? The head teacher I was working with was earning a fortune. I was there as a volunteer, and yet I was seen as the money man, if you sort of mean. And it's like, hold on, this is completely upside down. We're actually the volunteers. You're the professionals being paid to do this, and yet we're seen as the people that have got a business attitude on things, and which is supposed to be nasty and horrible and greedy. It's about trying to make the world a better place, trying to help people succeed by doing the best job you can. And leadership in particular is influential on improving the world. I would refine slightly some words you used, because you said I've worked with 300 odd business leaders. I would say, despite what the media says about business leaders, they are not mean, selfish, greedy bastards. They are human beings as well. And most if not, yeah, by far the majority of the business leaders I've worked with are driven by making the world a better place more than they are by making money. The reason they've started a business or they're running a business is not because they want to make millions. It's because they didn't like what they were being forced to do somewhere else and they want to do something differently. They cared about the product, they cared about the customers, they cared about the staff, different drivers, but they cared about that. And that's why they left the corporate world and said, I'm going to do it myself because then I can do what I believe in. And yes, they do earn a good living very often, but it's because they're doing a good job. It's that way round. Business in stereotypical way is about making money. No, that business is about solving problems in the world and solving them so well that customers are delighted to give you money to have their problems solved, that suppliers are delighted to work with you to help you solve the problem, that investors are delighted to throw money at you to invest to build the business better. It starts with solving a problem the world needs solved. And that definition, which is the way I see it, doesn't separate businesses from charities, from public sector. We're all here to solve the world's problems. We all have to run to a budget to stay viable. We all have to get funding to do that, whether that funding comes from investors in a business set, in the private sector, whether that funding comes from government in the public sector, or whether that funding comes from benefactors and donators if you're in the charitable sector. It's the same thing, and they all start with they should all be about, if you're a leader of one of those organizations, your focus should be on what's the problem I'm there to solve and how do I solve it. Just want to add one more thing that again is a refinement of something you said, is I don't want to imply that being a business leader means being soft. I'm absolutely clear that one of the biggest challenges business leaders face is their hesitation over making the right decision, when that right decision is a hard decision for the person they're talking to and a hard decision for them to implement. There are very few people that might like making people redundant. There are very few people that like performance managing somebody. But if you duck it, you're not being fair. Yeah,
I agree.
If you duck the performance management, you're not giving somebody the chance to improve. If you duck the redundancy, your business will ultimately go bust and nobody will have a job. So I take very seriously my responsibility as a business leader. And so this might be one of the reasons I succeeded, is because I took my responsibility seriously. That means I did make tough decisions a few times, and those were tough decisions for the people impacted. They were tough decisions for me to do because I hated the processes that I had to do, but they were necessary decisions. And whilst the decision itself was tough, I then tried to implement it in the most humane way I could. Now, that doesn't mean I duck the issue. You're making people redundant. They're not going to love you, But you have to have that conversation. You can have that conversation professionally and fairly and explain the situation. And yes, they will hate you for it, and they may scream and shout and get upset and cry, all things like that, which is horrible for them and also horrible for you. But you've got a job to do. And if you duck that job, things will be worse later. So, I think the sort of leadership for me has got these two sides. It's that, you've got to make the tough decisions, which is very hard. And the reason I'm passionate about this is because the 300 people I work with, I would say the problem was much more them hesitating over a tough decision than them rushing in to be hard-nosed bastard business leaders. Usually they were too kind and too gentle and would duck it until it was too late, and then the impact is much bigger. Yeah, you need to bite the bullet and deal with something early so it doesn't get too big.
Yeah, and I pick up a few things from that. I think we are quite aligned in our thinking and approach, which is probably one of the reasons why we're ending up having this conversation. But I guess it's key. There is the narrative that the purpose of business is to make profit. I think the purpose of business is to have a positive impact in whatever form that takes and make profit in the process of doing so, have a return in doing so.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about the communication, if people's roles are made redundant, people lose their jobs and all of their things, those things, they're not performing well and they're told about it. As tough as it is, I think people appreciate the communication.
Yes,
I
definitely.
think that's what makes the difference. They might hate you in the moment because they've lost a job, but probably not, because they'll appreciate the reason why it's being done. They'll appreciate the reason why they're being told that what they're doing is not acceptable. I often talk about making people aware of how their role connects to the bigger picture so that they understand the impact, and they also understand the impact, if they're doing things well, how that has a positive impact, and if they're not, how actually it affects the whole business, regardless of what their role is. And so that communication is key. But it's also great to talk about all the people in business, in charity, whatever the sector, that are doing things to have a positive impact. Because thinking specifically about men, there is often a narrative about making money and wealth and having things. And if we go back to the influencer world, there are positive influencers, but we focus a lot on the negatives and the loudest people. But there is that thing about things, the wealth and things, and if you don't have things, so if you don't have the car and the house and the things, how do you look after a family? Because I find, well, at one level we say roles have changed over time, there still seems to be something of an expectation for men to provide. And some people will challenge me for saying that. But subtly or otherwise, there is still often that expectation for men to provide and look after, to attract the female that you want, that you have to have the things to be able to look after her and have your children and send your children to the best schools and all of that. I don't know how that resonates in any form.
Yeah, I mean, I, yes, I agree, but I don't think it is completely wrong. I think it is right that both parents see their role as to provide for the family in whatever way they can. And whether right or wrong, and I'm no expert in this stuff, it feels like women generally have a better ability to provide the emotional support and so on. We're saying they're better at it than men are, and men physically can generally go and do, not all, but generally can go and do more physical stuff and provide the food, traditionally food or whatever. So I think there is an element of which there's a natural, but you should provide in whatever way you can, is my view, and that's not gender specific. The fact that we've been built in a certain way and we can provide in particular ways is influenced by gender, but not exclusive by gender, if that makes sense. So I think providing is an important thing for both parties to do, whether it's emotional or physical support. I was thinking as you were talking, I was chuckling to myself because I thought if my kids see this, and they'll be chuckling because, and I think one of the things I've done right with bringing them up is I have always tried to provide for them emotionally and socially and culturally and educationally rather than physically. And the biggest representation of that is the joke about birthday presents. My kids almost never receive physical birthday presents. Their birthday present was a trip here, a experience there, etc., etc. And that still goes on. We're talking about them in their late 20s and early 30s. And the typical present I would give them is a day trip somewhere. Or the latest one, actually, from my nephew rather than my kids, was an escape room experience. And the joke is always, I always give experiences and not things. And sort of that's part of the internal stereotype of our family, if you like. But I think it's quite an important thing that I would encourage to other people is, kids' experiences, are developmental, but also the kids remember them. They remember events 10, 15 years ago, when if I'd spent the same money on some sort of gizmo or something, they would have thrown it away long ago. So one tip I would give to any father or mother or family is try not to give material things. And I guess there's a sort of subtext coming from that as well, which is what I'm saying to them is things that matter are not the physical things that much. What matters is the life experience, and that's why I like to think my kids have grown up well, because they do value the life experience more. And as I realise it, I'm thinking they're always off travelling, going, seeing the country, seeing the world, that sort of thing. They know they're not people that sit at home gorging on social media and pizzas and takeaways and beer.
And for me, that goes back in a way because, and I guess that's not to say that things are not important. It's not bad to have nice things. But you mentioned the importance of doing good in the world. And I guess the more you have experiences of the world, you get to travel or explore places, and you can actually explore and create an awareness of places through social media and online more so than you could previously. But the more you become aware of the world around you, the better you can be with other people, the more supportive you can be with other people within the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I've read a little bit around the sort of theme of happiness, which sounds awfully touchy-feely, sort of soft stuff. But I can't remember the exact numbers, but you buy a new car, and for a month you feel good. But within 3 months, you're back where you were emotionally. What makes you more sustainably happy is actually doing something you enjoy and being able to look back and remember it and look at the pictures and think about the great time you had and that sort of thing. So for me, I'm very clear experiences are far, far more valuable as presents for my kids, but also in terms of what I do. I tend to be a bit of a geek that likes buying things like that, but other than that, really, I don't spend a lot on physical stuff, but I do spend quite a lot on travelling and seeing the world and meeting people and enjoying things. And I'd commend that, really, I suppose what I'm saying. It's not about having things. Actually, can I sidetrack slightly, because it's prompted me to think of another thing. One of the things I realised about my life is when I was young, I was and you talked about my success in business. I was fairly goal focused. I was driven to achieve things. As you won't be surprised to hear, not achieve necessarily financial things, although that was part of it. It was more about status, career, progression, development. So achieving an MBA, achieving my first class honours degree, and then achieving the MBA and achieving promotion at work and all those sort of things. So achievement is what drove me. Goals. Probably about 20, 30 years ago, I began to evolve and realise that although some people say you should set yourself smart goals and have an ambition to whatever, I shifted from that and shifted from it consciously, because I realised that if I set myself a goal, sometimes I would achieve it early because I had a bit of luck and grabbed it. And sometimes I would work absolutely flat out to try and achieve the goal, but still not achieve it. And so I started to think, well, that's not fair to beat myself up because I didn't achieve the goal if I worked bloody hard and it didn't happen. But on the other hand, I shouldn't take credit for achieving the goal if it just happened easily. So I began to move away from the idea of goals. So for most of the last 30 years, I've talked about directions. This is the direction I want to move in. I want to become a better swimmer. I want to achieve more challenges as a swimmer. I want my business to have more customers. I want my business to influence more people. I want my business to be more successful. That's the direction of travel. And I might have a milestone, a goal that's sort of saying, I would like to get to 1 million turnover. I'd like to get to this far. I'd like to do this acquisition or whatever. But the clarity would be around the direction rather than the goal. I'd say, I'm not saying it's wrong to have goals, but don't focus on them too much. Focus on the direction of travel and get there as quickly as you can in that direction.
No, sorry, you're still talking.
I just wanted to add one final thing, which is where I've moved to in the last 5 years, and this is retirement stage, so it's not for everybody, is I've actually now even moved on from that, in that I've done so much in my life, I've enjoyed so much, that now it's more about taking the opportunities I have today. So it's not so much as, I don't have any particular direction I want to go in. I'm happy where I am. I don't want to go anywhere else. I'm enjoying life. And so It's about each day taking the opportunity that comes along. So I've switched from goals in my early career to directions in my mid-career. So in my later life, I'm now focused on taking opportunities, every opportunity that comes to me. You offer me the opportunity to go on the podcast? Yeah, why not? Sounds like fun. Yeah, I can be helpful to people. Yeah, okay, I'll do it. So I tend to say yes to opportunities whenever I can.
Yeah, no, thank you for that because I often talk about and speak to people, specifically men, where there's success, undeniable success in terms of if you think of achievements or goals that have been achieved, but there's not necessarily a sense of fulfillment. And I think in many ways you're touching on that because you can do, and if it's all about being successful, there can be an emptiness. It's almost like having the things because you're just about doing and achieving as opposed to enjoying the journey and taking opportunities along the way.
Absolutely, and that's what I mean by the directions in the mid is enjoy the journey, and now I'm enjoying the choices almost. We in the UK are not particularly good about talking about death, but I will do just briefly. If I died tomorrow, I wouldn't be disappointed. If that makes sense. I mean, it's a stupid thing to say, but it's like life's good, and I don't need any more. But while I'm alive, I will keep doing more and enjoying more and so on. And long may it last. But it doesn't matter. Things like it's going to come along one day, and you don't know when it's going to be. And, I'd like to think that whatever day it is, then the day before I've had a good life, good day.
That's good to hear. A couple more things. I'm just going back to that whole thing about different roles from a gender perspective. That there are things that we might believe women are typically better at, some things that men might be better at. I talk about gender harmony, people talk about equity. How do we achieve that equity or greater harmony between genders if people have specific roles? Or I mean, or maybe we do have different roles, but I'm just thinking, how do we create harmony? I mean, you mentioned earlier that there is a lot of gender talk. I'm possibly paraphrasing what you talk, and it almost becomes competitive. Of you've done this or you do this, but how do we create harmony when we talk about gender?
I want to be flippant, give a flippant answer, which is by not talking about gender. I feel today we probably talk about gender too much. Maybe I'm saying that from a male perspective, but it's like just be yourself. And if you happen to be in a male body, but your personality is what the stereotype would say was a female personality, so what? You just behave in the way that you feel is natural for you, and that means your roles in the world will be what traditionally would have been seen as a female role. But so what? You're a carer. You're stereotypical. The carer, the school teacher, the nurse, the whatever. If that's what you want to do, then do it, and don't worry about whether it's male, female occupation that you're following. Vice versa, if you're a female and you enjoy playing rugby, to be very flippant about it, you enjoy being a strong leader, then do it. I think we should stop talking about gender so much, perhaps.
Yeah.
That's creating the barrier that people are, we're reinforcing the stereotype by saying there are two genders or many genders or whatever. It doesn't matter.
Where I would probably, should I say, press on that or challenge that is it could be said that we need to talk about it so that people understand the different experiences. That, I mean, as women, we will often say men don't understand what it's like to be a woman. You don't understand the challenges of trying to raise children and at the same time trying to work and juggle things, or you don't understand menopause, all of those things and how that has an impact, all of those different things. And so if we don't talk about these things, How do we bridge the gap of understanding?
Yeah, I can see that, and I think there's an argument the opposite way around as well. Um, some of my difficult times, I can remember a conversation with my wife about how when I've been struggling, it's been feeling the pressure to be the provider, um, to be the male, and actually, I want to cry, I want to be upset, I want to be more female. So I think that I guess I was making a point and being a bit too strong about it. I'm not. You're absolutely right. We need to think about these things. But what I'm suggesting is, in those conversations, we're trying not to reinforce the stereotype of the genders, if that makes sense. That's my concern. Is that sometimes when you're talking about gender, it's making the stereotype of the binary too strong. And actually, there are plenty of, as I mentioned earlier, I saw my management style as a female management style, but I had to pretend to be a bloke, if you see what I mean.
So many masculine traits we'd often talk about.
Yeah, and we've got to sort of try and accept that everybody is different, and we're all going to have a blend of what might be seen stereotypically as female characteristics and male characteristics. We want to have a blend of those in our own way, and yeah, so I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about gender. Of course, we should, but at the same time, don't let's try and avoid reinforcing gender stereotypes by doing so. And you mentioned social media earlier. I do cringe with both male and females on social media playing stereotypes, and I see females doing it as much as males doing it. The sort of posing and the positioning and the, I don't know, trying to look at whatever they think they should look like as a female. And I see guys doing the same, and it's like, no, don't try and be something you're not. Just do what you enjoy.
Yeah. And so I guess there's a need for a greater balance in terms of the conversation, the dialogue. We can't not talk about these things because we don't understand, we don't make progress, especially challenges that have been around forever, if we don't have the conversations. But it needs to be balanced. It needs to recognize the difference in individuality of each and every one of us. So, a concluding question for me, I believe it's a concluding question. What would you want people to know about men, being a man, that we don't know, that we don't talk about?
And when you say people, do you mean that females might not understand?
Females might not understand, yes.
This might be me. I can only talk from my own perspective, but I do think there are many other men in a similar position, which is we have a shell around us that is based on the stereotypes that we've both been trying to demolish a bit, that we have to be strong, we have to be provider, we have to be non-emotional, we have to be the rock for the family, the wife and family, whatever. And 98% of the time, we play that role in life and in the world. And maybe I'm talking about British men here as well. I don't know. Maybe British white, stale male, whatever you call us. But I'm talking about myself. So I do perceive myself as having this shell of what the role I need to play in the world. And I'm not necessarily saying it's wrong. It is what I'm there to do in the world, if in some ways. But don't think that is everything. Underneath the hard, tough shell of being the provider, being the male, I suspect most men are like me. In fact, I know many are, because they sometimes open up. Underneath, we're very vulnerable and weak, and maybe even weaker than females are perceived to be. That we've got a very soft underbelly that gets hurt, and you just have to man up and take it, And for me, I would encourage females to be aware that for many males there is that under softness, which they struggle to reveal, they struggle to acknowledge, struggle to deal with. But I think that shell and the soft underbelly that I'm talking about is the reason why the biggest cause of death up to 40, I think, for males is suicide.
Yeah.
I think it's because underneath there is a real problem going on for many males that they cannot get out beyond the shell. I'm talking about my father. I mentioned it right back at the beginning. My father dying young, trying to get him to talk about the stresses he was feeling, and he couldn't talk about it. And he ends up with a heart attack. So that wasn't suicide; it was heart attack. They're not that far apart, you know. It's because there's a gap between the external and the internal. It's a problem. So I would encourage females to be aware of it. I would encourage males to try and break down that barrier in themselves. I try to, but because of my upbringing, I don't always manage it. You know, my kids hopefully can see that I can cry, and they tease me a bit about it sometimes. So they are aware that I'm much softer than it might appear at times.
Yeah. If you're happy to say, and if he wouldn't mind, how's your son different?
He's the same, but actually, maybe because of social media, don't know. I think he finds it more difficult than me. So he, to many externals, would probably see him as very confident, very arrogant almost, cocky young guy, because that's the way he's grown up to be, if you like. But a few of us, and I would count on one hand the number of people that I think that are aware of it, know how soft and vulnerable he is underneath. And he's extremely so. It worries me at times. So that's just an extreme example of what I'm saying that people be aware of with blokes often. I mean, I'm talking the UK people I'm aware of. There is this outer shell and there's the inner thing. So he's a lovely, kind-hearted, family-spirited, nice guy underneath, but he has to be strong externally. To give him credit, he's a bit of an influencer in his sport of golf. He's got a lot of, he earns his living as a golf influencer. And one of his styles that he's developed on media is being open about the challenges. And he talks about when he's done badly and how he feels and that sort of thing as well. So he is using social media in a positive way to not to pretend everything is perfect and hunky-dory and easy. So I quite like that. I mean, I think his strapline on TikTok is the honesty in golf about what it's like as a golf professional. And he, as I say, he talks about the struggles he has psychologically, because golf is very psychological, struggles he has financially in funding his life, all those sort of things. He talks about that stuff openly, which is really good. And I think that's part of him being on the journey and finding himself in the same way as I have.
Yeah, thank you. He sounds like part of our tribe in many ways. He also sounds like someone I should be talking to as well. And it's sad that it's not uncommon. One of the reasons why I started talking to and about men more is having written a book around women, male perspectives on the value of women at work, and running a number of master classes and talks. I found people, specifically women, saying, actually, I'm not that concerned about my daughter. I'm more concerned about my son. And that is key to me in terms of, let me try to better understand what's going on here. Because I believe if men are happy, fulfilled people within the world that we live in, they are not going to do the negative things that we often associate with men. They're more likely to be supportive of other people, and that helps all of us together. And as you were talking about the outer shell with the vulnerable person within, I just wonder in conclusion how we can best, and you've touched on it largely, but how do we reveal that person, enable that person in men to thrive and to be the best that they can be for the sake of self and the people around us? How can we all jointly, us as women and everyone else, How can we bring out that richness in men?
By doing exactly what we're doing now. I think the more you talk about it, the better it is. And finishing on an optimistic note, I think I'm in a far better place than my father was. I think he was in a far better place than his grandfather was. So better. It does state. I still subscribe to that view that it was a bad place that was caused by the Industrial Revolution, and each generation is getting better. My son is better at it than I was at his age. And let's hope that each generation gets better at talking about their feelings and understanding how to live a good life.
Thank you very much. If people want to contact you, I don't know why they wouldn't want to, how do they go about doing so?
Okay, apart from the fact that I have the same name as a former US football coach called Bob Bradley, I'm reasonably easy to find online. LinkedIn, Ian and Bob Bradley will find me. I've got a website, bobbradley.co.uk, so it shouldn't be difficult to find. An email is bob@bobbradley.co.uk. So I'd love to talk to people, both about business leadership and the challenges of that. We've talked about a few of those topics, but also about being a man making the world a better place and how you can do that better. I'm passionate about this stuff.
Thank you very much. I've visited your website and it's full of rich resources. I've enjoyed talking to you today as I have previously, and hopefully we will have many more conversations today. I really appreciate your insight and for you being part of the conversation. Thank you, Bob.
Lovely. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for inviting me on.
Thank you for joining me for today's conversation. I hope you found it insightful. Get in touch and let me know what you think, or if I or any of my guests can be of support to you. Until next time, this is Susan Popoola, working towards the creation of a Mosaic World. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Leading in the Mosaic World podcast. Do visit our website at www.mosaicworld.live to find out more about what we do and how we can be of support to you. Alternatively, connect with me, Susan Popoola, spelt Popoola, on LinkedIn, and let me know what you think of the podcast. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, give it a first-class rating, and tell everyone you know all about it. Thank you.